Welcome to GamecockPod Live.
For the next 3 to 4 years, I'll be committed to the University of Gamecock.
This is Rodgers again to the 25, 20, 15, 10. Rodgers scores!
Jackie Bradley Jr. delivers for the Gamecocks.
Lost it up, looking for Kelly. Touchdown! Can you believe it?
And South Carolina is sending shockwaves through the SEC.
Plays it in at the buzzer! That's a win! Unbelievable! I don't believe it!
And now, live from Studio 54 of the Gamecock Pod Studios, here's the Cockfather himself, Keith Alsep.
All right, everybody, welcome into Gamecock Pod Live for September the 13th, episode number 1303. So a lot of 13s today. We've got a great show for you today. Coming up in just a little bit, we will be joined by the SEC Stat Cat himself, Clark Brooks of On3 Sports, SECStatCat.com, at SEC_StatCat on Twitter. This guy, what he does is amazing. I don't even know all the stuff he does. He's got all the advanced analytics. It's phenomenal. I know this. I'm looking on the passer page, and Spencer Rattler's number one. So we're going to bring him in. We're going to talk about Spencer Rattler. We're going to talk about Carson Beck. We're going to talk about Will Rogers, the next two quarterbacks the Gamecocks will face. We're going to dive in on Rattler, what he's seen about him or from him, the difference from last year to this year schematically with Dowell Loggains. And then we're going to talk about Xavier Legette, who leads all wide receivers in FBS in receiving yards with 296 yards through 2 games. But first, get your questions in to the Nana's Porch chat box. News, notes, and headlines brought to you today by Nana's Porch. Nana's Porch, full-service catering company servicing the greater Charlotte, North Carolina area. Whether it's a banquet, a wedding, a corporate event, a big backyard bash with the whole hog barbecue, Nana's Porch has got you covered. If you want to bring in a food trailer, Nana's Porch is the go-to. They are voted among the top 3 food trailers in Charlotte by the local newspaper poll, and their award-winning pimento cheese, not just number 1, but number 1 and number 2 in the meat and cheese category by the North Carolina Specialty Foods Association. Number 1, the smoky jalapeno, which is my favorite. The smoke takes a little bit of the spice out of the jalapeno so you don't get the burn, but you still get the flavor. And then the regular flavor pimento cheese come in at number 2. So go to nanasporch.com. That's NANASPORCH.com. Get in touch with my good friend Chris Payne for all your catering needs. I encourage you to all support this Gamecock owned and operated business. All right, Saturday afternoon, it is Bulldogs and Gamecocks at 3:30 on CBS. Gary Danielson and Brad Nessler on the call. Love Brad Nessler. Not so much on Gary Danielson. That's just me. Maybe the last time. This is the last year for CBS with the SEC. Gamecocks, 2019 in Athens wasn't too bad. Huge underdogs this week, the Gamecocks. They have a monumental challenge in front of them. We'll talk a little bit about that. As far as on the injury report, JT Gear, a guy South Carolina desperately needs as an edge rusher, should be back this week. Marquis Anderson also back. Juice Wells, according to Dowell Loggains and my sources, finally looks like himself this week. He's ready to go. You put him on the other side of Xavier, Legette, and, Eddie Lewis. He was ranked number 1 in the nation for wide receiver efficiency for his performance against Furman. If Amarian Brown can't go, Eddie Lewis is going to be dependent on. Maybe you could put Juju McDowell there in the slot a little bit more, and maybe that'll free up more carries for Marquis Anderson. Man, my words are wrong. Not Marquis Anderson, Mario Anderson, and DJ Braswell at running back. Dowell Loggains today mentioned the freshman offensive lineman. I don't know if they'll start, but I really liked it when they had Trey Babalade at left tackle, Nick Gargiulo at left guard, Vershawn Lee at center, Trevon Baugh at right guard, and Ja'Kai Moore at right tackle. I think, to me, they played the best. Loggains really likes what he saw from Trey Babalade, said he's got football instincts. He and Babalade can really set the edge. He said when you play freshmen, it becomes about talent and living through some of those mistakes. He says he's expecting them to play well when they get in there. They're smart and they compete hard. They want to play, still a long way to go. But when you recruit the right body types, that's something to really be excited about. So there is that. Clayton White, really excited about the challenge of facing Georgia. He mentioned when they get Nick Emanwari back, Emanwari and DQ Smith can play different positions. Jalen Kilgore is a true freshman. He is stuck at one position. All you guys know, I've been saying it. I expect when they get all those guys healthy at the same time, they'll all be in the game, and DQ or Nick Emanwari will be at nickel, and Kilgore and the other one will be at safety. All right. Today's show brought to you by mybookie.ag, the official sports book of GamecockPod Live. As a bettor, you demand perfection, and MyBookie delivers. NFL, college football, a brand new cash-out system give you options to bet and win all season long. If the first 2 legs of your parlay hit, cash out early. Use those winnings on another bet or let it ride for the chance at a bigger payday. Join the MyBookie family for an entire season filled with odds boost, free bets, and super contests. This season, MyBookie has .ag has a no strings attached cash bonus that lets you deposit and withdraw quick. Use the promo code Gamecocks50 on a deposit of $50 or more, and you can receive up to $200 in cash instantly to your MyBookie account. Bet your deposit amount once, and you're ready to cash out at any time. That's promo code Gamecocks50 to claim your cash bonus. You can bet anything, anytime, anywhere, only with mybookie.ag. And with that, let's bring in the SEC stat cat himself, Clark Brooks. Clark, man, I can't tell you how fired up I am to have you back. I love your excitement, your passion, and man, you do so much stuff. I don't even know all the abbreviations, what some of the stuff is. So welcome in. How's the first 2 weeks of SEC play been for you, and what have you seen that's really caught your eye?
Well, Keith, thank you for having me. Of course, I'm excited. SEC football is back, my friend. Well, a growing trend within football, whether it is high school, college, NFL, you're seeing a high degree of two deep coverages. So what is that telling you? Defenses are trying to take away the big, deep ball. So that's resulting in quarterbacks realizing that and taking available space underneath. So you're seeing across all levels a lower degree of average depth of target, lower degrees of deep pass rate, higher completion percentages. But at the same time, even though they are getting completions, the yards per attempt isn't following just because there is so much concentration on the short stuff. Of course, that is right in South Carolina's wheelhouse because we know Spencer Rattler loves to stretch, or he can stretch the field. The issue is getting the verticality out of him, getting the best of his aggressive traits out of him. Because, again, no one really likes to check down Charlie to space. It's not sexy. And, it's just one of these things that are really catching my eye as we are in the early part of the season, just how much teams are using those two deep shells and how much the average quarterback is starting to dink and dunk more than years past.
So let's talk about Spencer Rattler.
Yeah.
55 of 66, 83%, 698 yards, 3 touchdowns. I mean, he's been unbelievable through 2 games. Juice Wells has not been 100%. Xavier Legette, though, has been beasting everyone.
Finally.
Yes.
Finally. No, I have a tweet out there, and someone actually reminded me of it. This was at the beginning of September 2021. I had a tweet that said, South Carolina should not target Xavier Legette the rest of his career. Because at that point in time, he had 3 straight years of not only being a below average receiver on a per target basis, but he was damn near the cellar of the conference. So he was a wasted rep no matter where he was used, where he was targeted. But of course, that immensely changed in week 1. His big frame. Again, if Rattler is more comfortable throwing it up to someone with his frame and you get those results, more power to you. But he has been a great revelation with Wells not being 100%.
I mean, I think it went back. It goes back to a few things. The guy's had a lot of injuries. I mean, my good friend Eric Kimry, who's now at the Baylor School in Chattanooga, he was on Shane Beamer's staff, but when he was coaching Boogie Huntley and Jordan Birch at Hammond, he could go over to practice and he said, man, this kid, Xavier Legette, he just does stuff that's unbelievable. But honestly, he was being coached by the worst wide receivers coach in all of Division I football, and Brian McClendon. I hope that rubs off on the Bulldogs. Unfortunately, they hit on some transfer portal guys that have probably been coached up pretty good.
Well, Rod Thomas and Dom Luffick have actually had slow starts to the season. It's one of the big, complaints coming from the Georgia fan base. Of course, a lot of it is directed towards Mike Bobo. But let's be honest, they're running the exact same stuff they are last year, minus the 12 personnel usage. So the scheme, the plays, they're basically the same. It's just the guys haven't been exactly the same, and the execution is leaving big plays on the field because they've been kind of dinking and dunking, kind of plodding. They have captured explosives, but definitely not at the rate they have last year. But yeah, Xavier Legette definitely will help keep them at least in a decent position to capture those explosives, flip fields, because winning down to down against Georgia with as poor as South Carolina's line has been playing, not only just this year, but the last 3 years, you don't want to set yourself up to get 2-3-yard gains at best against Georgia's defense. Yeah, you might get a little bit more incompletions, a little bit more degree of, adversity when you are throwing downfield, but still, that is the best area to give yourself a chance to win. And when you have a 6'7" wide receiver, and when you look at Georgia's secondary and they only have 1 interception and it's from a safety, you might be able to talk yourself into playing a little bit more aggressively against one of the better units in the country, just because you just cannot hang around trying to play small, which is what Beamer typically likes to do.
So I have to go back really. I mean, this guy's always had the talent, but when Stephen Garcia was at South Carolina and the head ball coach was roaming the sideline, Garcia trusted Alshon Jeffrey, and there were a lot of 50-50 balls, and he threw it up, and you know what? Alshon would go and get it. Juice Wells went and got it last year from Rattler, particularly at the end of the season. Legette had one of the most spectacular catches of the year in the Gator Bowl. I think that really ignited his confidence to the point to where he knew he can do it. Yes, he faced North Carolina, who still can't stop anybody. If South Carolina could have just kept Spencer Rattler upright, they win that game. The way he was dialing it up.
Basically like a 40% pressure rate. Average is around 28. So they definitely did not do him any favors. And of course, we've seen how the scheme is trying to have him to adjust. There was a big emphasis over the weekend. Get the ball out quick. I mean, I think it was until the second quarter, Rattler did not have a pass travel over 10 yards downfield. So yeah, that was the clear emphasis. Get the ball out. Don't take sacks. Don't move backwards. Just get it to a playmaker in the flank and force the defense from those two high shells to make one of those safeties come out and make a play in space rallying. But I think that's going to be a similar approach this week, unfortunately, just because I don't think the line's going to be able to hold up that much. I know Georgia, they themselves are looking to replace a lot of guys in their front seven, but Mikael Williams is the driver. He is going to be a matchup problem for South Carolina. I would not rule out the idea that they're going to try and move him around the front just to try and maximize some matchups, maybe with some stunts and blitzes and free up some other people. But with just how porous the line has been, it's unfortunately going to be a little bit more rinky-dinky from South Carolina, I think, just because they're not going to be able to hold up and get those downfield shot completions unless they literally do 8-man protections, which if you're just running a 2-man route, I don't really like your degree of success in that degree. I don't like your degree of success setting yourself up for that style of play either.
So last time I had you on, we talked about how elite Spencer Rattler is outside of the pocket, on the move, when they move the pocket. I think South Carolina is going to have to do more of that. You go back to that Clemson game last year, they had like an 8-man protection. They rolled Rattler out of the pocket. They had a high-low on the roll side and one guy on the backside, and that's when he hit Juice Wells for the 71-yard touchdown that really turned the tide in that game. I mean, South Carolina's offensive line problem is not going to be solved overnight. Dowell Loggains said it was fluid. They did play 2 true freshmen. They're going to continue to play them. That's not a recipe for success against Georgia, but quite frankly, Georgia's not the benchmark for South Carolina this year. It's Mississippi State, Florida, Kentucky, Vanderbilt, Missouri, Texas A&M, Jacksonville State, Gamecock on Gamecock crime later in the season. And you get these guys better along with some of your younger wide receivers like Nicholas Harbor, like Tyshawn Russell that we saw against Furman in the debut of Lenora Sellers. I don't know if you even chart him because he hadn't played much.
Oh, I do. I saw that Albert's completion. Don't get me wrong. 50 yards, 55 yards in the air, perfectly placed. Yeah, we at On 3 are really excited for what he can potentially be in the coming years for South Carolina. If he stays there, because again, we are in the transfer portal era. I'm not going to rule out that someone might come out and poach him because he is a very, very talented youngster. Very talented.
I mean, was a star born Saturday night? This guy's 6'3", 245.
Heck, I mean,
older guys.
He kind of
remember back to Dante Culpepper.
I mean, he kind of flashed in the spring game. So I wouldn't say he was born overnight, but yeah, it definitely did help that narrative solidify that, I think this dude is legit. I can't wait for him. He's gonna help the transition period from when Rattler does leave. When you do replace quarterbacks, there can be a lot of drop off in play across the board because while quarterback is definitely a traits-driven thing, it's also very cerebral, getting people lined up, knowing what people are supposed to run, and did the down-to-down execution. Bad example right now is Peyton Thorne. He has not necessarily been the most flashy downfield thrower. In my opinion, Auburn has the most rudimentary, basic passing offense right now, but his main job is basically making sure the formations are correct, everyone's lined up, and everyone knows what their assignments are so the operation can go. But in terms of just talent, you don't have to worry about that with Settlers. I mean, obviously, we have to see a little bit more sample, a little bit more extended snaps to see if it wasn't just a mirage against backups in garbage time, but still, for what we've seen on tape so far, nothing really to complain about.
I mean, 6'3", 245, 4.41 legit speed, a cannon for an arm. And he had over a 5.0 GPA. I don't even know how you do that.
Yeah, these AP classes these days, they really skew the numbers. I always hate this. People skew numbers using, screens and RPOs to pad their passing stats. Well, it seems like AP courses are starting to do that now with high school GPAs, unfortunately. But yeah, 5.0 GPA. Again, there's really little to knock on this kid's profile. He really does check a whole lot of boxes, and there's really not a lot of reason to be conservative in estimating an output for him just because he is so freaking talented and that ceiling is so high.
Yeah, and he's a true dual threat guy because he's, could be, everybody wants to compare him to KJ Jefferson. He's not KJ Jefferson, but they are about
Jefferson's
the same size.
Jefferson's more of I don't want to say a lug, but he's more of a power-driven scrambler more than like a nifty guy who makes guys miss. He kind of plays with dead feet in the pocket. I don't think that's Sellers. I think he's a little bit more peppy, a little bit more juicy in the twitch department.
I like it. So
yeah,
last weekend, we had the always massive reaction. Texas vaults up to number 4 in the nation. Quinn Ewers was finally the best quarterback on the field. That doesn't happen very often.
Finally hit a deep ball.
Yeah.
He finally hit a deep ball, Keith. I mean, in my impact study over the summer where I looked at like our top 30 most impactful quarterbacks, or like the ones I think are the best, coming back for this upcoming season against their 6th hardest opponents. In those games, he went 0 for completing a deep ball. That's not going to win you many ball games. And when you're a strong arm quarterback, it's just really, really frustrating. Of course, that one moonshot to Worthy, I sent some of my coworkers a message right after it happened. I'm like, that is the most beautiful moonshot I have seen in a few years. It was just masterful how he put so much air under it to let the speedy Worthy run underneath of it in the end zone. Of course, that really did jolt the Texas Longhorns, give them the momentum to pull off that road victory. And of course, it didn't help that Alabama could not run the ball at all after halftime. They had 9 design rushes. Only one of them worked. That's not going to work. That's just not going to help you outman and outgun a team like Texas. No, I don't want to say Texas is back, but they're on their way to being back with wins like that.
No doubt, but I thought Jalen Milroe, the turnovers, the lack of he's not any of the dudes Alabama has had in the past. And I think if that's your dog agrees.
Yeah, my dog agrees. She's barking like crazy because you can't play that volatile for a Tommy Rees offense. You cannot take sacks. You cannot hold the ball for 4 seconds. You got to get it out. You got to get to your freaking playmakers because look, Alabama does have playmakers. I do like Jace McClellan. He started that game fairly well. He was a good tackle breaker, but the problem was as the game went along and the defense was like, okay, we're going to make Milroe beat us. Whether it is a 20-yard scramble or a 4-yard bomb, we're going to make him make a play. And he did get a play or two, but still just the inexperience was telling. I mean, we saw last year him in extended stints, wasn't really the biggest sample size, but still he obtained the worst returning depth-adjusted accuracy of any SEC starter. That's not a good trait to have when you're trying to move towards a more pro-style scheme, but it looks like his best self is going to have to be in that read option game. I would strongly urge Alabama to explore plays besides just inside zone and duo. I know the last couple of years they have really struggled pulling linemen. It has not been a strength of theirs, but at the same time, they have to present the defense more exotic looks to potentially set up other complementary things, whether it is power play action, running back misdirections or receiver handoffs, because again, they do have talent there. It's just the quarterback position is the main reason why a lot of people are just not going to respect Alabama this year.
No doubt. So we witnessed, are we witnessing the end of the Jimbo Fisher era? And what is the Bobby Petrino Jimbo partnership been like? They just took out behind I guess there's probably not a woodshed in Coral Gables, so behind the tiki bar.
Oh, so yeah, the pool
and just
house
got worn out.
You know, the pool water pump house, whatever that thing's called. But yeah, offensive line, that was a big issue for Texas A&M last year, and that kind of permeated into week one. They had a decent showing against New Mexico, which last time I checked was a bottom 3 team in ESPN's SB Plus in terms of quality. So again, it was fool's gold. And that just it really showed up against Miami, where they just pressured Wegman, and they really made him operate under the gun. You know, I'm not necessarily enthralled with his arm talent, but I do love his moxie. That kid stood in there and he took some hits and he delivered some throws under duress. He had some very nice wide receivers. Now, we mentioned earlier, you know, having a nice wide receiver, a big wide receiver just to throw up and win contested balls. Well, he's got like 4 of those, led by Noah Thomas, 6'6". I think he had a touchdown, 3 touchdowns in 2 games. So, yeah, he's definitely emerging as a top talent within the SEC. But Wegman himself, just because he's a little bit limited, that scheme has to maximize him. So what do? Well, we know Fisher, he's a little adverse to play actions. He's adverse to screens. He's adverse to RPOs. But again, those are things that really do help mitigate bad offensive line play. Again, we mentioned it earlier with Rattler, getting the ball out quick so you're not moving backwards. You're just trying to get it out to a perimeter athlete in space. So there was an uptick of that in the Wegman games last year, and that has steadied the first 2 games, but it's still nothing astronomical. It's not near the top of the conference, but it is a noticeable upgrade in that department. But still, just because of how the offensive line is so porous and disappointing, it's going to cap what that end result's going to be for the Aggies this year. You know, the defense is talented. If they can win some rock fights, I do like their chances, but just because I don't trust their inability, or I should say their ability down to not only run block, but maintain pockets with someone like Wegman, who's not an eraser. I mean, he's not a statue, but he's not a guy who can erase mistakes consistently, win with his legs consistently, running sideline to sideline. So I think they're going to have to do a little bit more cookie cutter stuff as opposed to what they potentially maybe want to do with Bobby Petrino. But still at the same time, I do admire the increase in verticality. There's a more emphasis on the mid-range game as opposed to just throwing it towards the flat. So there is some silver lines there with the Bobby Petrino play calls. But look, bottom line, they're still basically running the same offense. It's just the order of operations is just a little bit altered with him in charge.
All right, so LSU in Florida State week 1, I was not expecting that.
Oh, yeah? How come?
I know Florida State's in the ACC, but to me, if you look at name, image, and likeness, FSU and Colorado are proving the transfer portal can be impactful. And LSU, I love Daniels. I have immense respect for Brian Kelly. I was not expecting that, but man, Florida State absolutely boat raced them in the second half of that game.
Yeah, and one of my big issues with LSU's offense is a reason why. It's because Jaden Daniels won't freaking throw downfield. He is a throw-it passer. You know, at SEC Media Days, I had the pleasure to talk to Brian Kelly, and I asked him, why did your offensive coordinator come out this spring and basically say, we want to put an emphasis on getting yards after the catch? Well, you have to get yards after the catch for explosives if you're constantly targeting short. But Brian Kelly's like, well, we really liked how Daniels was throwing at contested windows and downfield towards the end of the year. Well, you were also playing in a game against Georgia where you kind of had to take risks. It was a one-off. If you lost, it was no big deal. The season was over. We need to see that stuff every game. And that's why they basically lost their footing in the second half. They kept throwing to the flat. They weren't testing the secondary downfield. And look, Aaron Anderson, Neighbors, Lacey, these aren't pushover guys. These are a quality bunch of receivers. And when you have someone like Mason Taylor at tight end as well to really maximize matchups, to see you consistently run West Coast staples like spot tosser or just mesh or these underneath stuff, it's just, man, if you're going to be an SEC passer, I want to know that you have the moxie to throw downfield and get a completion when your team needs it. And of course, the team needed it all second half, and they just didn't get it. And when the offensive line underwhelmed, providing cushion in the run game and made them much more one-dimensional, Jaden Daniels is not going to beat too many teams by himself, too many quality teams by himself, I should say. I mean, he could beat like a Mississippi State or an Auburn, but I don't know if he can beat Alabama by himself. I don't know if he can outgun A&M by themselves if they can figure things out. So they're going to have to figure out a lot more ways to maximize stuff between the tackles. Of course, they just kicked butt over the weekend against a poop state opponent. They had a get-right game themselves. But again, we're going to have to see what things look like when, again, they face another SEC type of quality defense, because Jaden Daniels, there's a lot to like there. But if you're only going to scramble to space, if you can't erase sacks, if you aren't going to play aggressively and help your team win, if you're just going to be a caretaker, then I'm not going to look at you in the same line as other quarterbacks.
All right, so talking about erasers, Dowell Loggains last week referred to Spencer Rattler as spaghetti sauce because he covers up a lot of mistakes. He's an eraser. And so what have you seen different schematically, offensively? Shane Beamer was asked about this yesterday, and I thought he basically took a shot at the former offensive coordinator, who we did not mention his name on the podcast, when he said he has a great understanding schematically of what we're doing and where the ball's supposed to be, but we're not running the same 3 plays over and over again. But we don't have this vast library to where he's overloaded and doesn't know where the ball is supposed to go. We saw that all year, I thought, from him, until Shane Beamer finally reeled it in the Tennessee, the Clemson, and the bowl game, to where it was 20 or 30 plays and 3 or 4 personnel groupings instead of 112 plays and 18 personnel groupings. Is it just that Rattler's playing more free, or is it the influence of Dowell Loggains, who coached NFL quarterbacks for 15 years, and is some of it the opponent as well?
Yeah, some of it's the opponent. When you play someone kind of, let's just say, not up to your level, the script can definitely be watered down. You can repeat play calls a little bit more. But one emphasis that I have just noticed, it's the lack of unique plays. And we mentioned this last time I was on, where the former offensive coordinator, who's now at Nebraska and is 0-2, trying to right that ship, they had a lot of unique plays. Every week, basically 60 plays were something that had not been previously run before. That's not sustainable. Over the year, 71.5% of plays were unique plays. And it's interesting that 3 of the 5 games where they finished below their a certain mark, they had wins. So again, that's reducing the script, focusing on what you are good at. And one of the things that I have noticed that has basically been scrubbed from the script, they're not necessarily running tight bunch duo or counter runs. So those are gap scheme runs. They're trying to do a little bit more emphasis in outside zone. So outside zone is one way where you can try and get your playmakers in space and get away from all that congested stuff in the middle of the field, right? Look, on average, how many guys are between the tackle box? Like 8, 9, depending on the team is really run heavy. Well, what you're doing with the outside zone, you're just trying to seal them inside, clip them inside, and get your ball carrier towards the perimeter, right? And it's a fairly simple idea, but that has been a fairly noticeable emphasis this early part in the season in the run game. And again, I already mentioned there has been emphasis trying to get the ball out of his hands quick. That has been more of a week 2 tweak, as opposed to week 1, where they try to do a little bit more drop back stuff. But I do think there's still going to be a heavy dosage of slide routes, flat routes, bubble screens, true screens, stuff like that, just to try and, keep defenses guessing in a sideline to sideline sense more than a end zone to end zone sense. And again, it does somewhat facilitate, somewhat complements the rise in two deep shells, like I mentioned earlier. But at the same time, it does put way more emphasis into the receivers to make a play rather than your strong arm quarterback, which long term, I still want to see Rattler throw downfield more.
I completely agree. We did see more 12 personnel from South Carolina against Furman. I think because of the athleticism of Trey Knox and Joshua Simon, they can be very multiple because there is more tempo to this offense than last year.
Yeah, it's not as plotting. And as tight ends, they're not, let's just say, 6'4", 250. They're both are somewhat tweeners. You can maybe call them power slots, hybrid H-backs where I know Knox, he was a converted wide receiver and he was only moved to tight end out of necessity at Arkansas. So if you can use that to your advantage from spread sets. So what do I mean by that? If you want to do 12 personnel from empty and you motion someone in where he's like at that detached in-man online, but it's still an empty protection. Well, you can maybe dabble with quarterback runs or stuff between the box and really do continue to stress defenses that way, because I'm not the biggest fan of two-back Wildcat sets. I did a study over the summer where it's one of the least efficient plays over the last 4 years within the SEC when you have a two-back Wildcat set. And, of course, they kind of dabbled with that near the end of the year, getting a Joyner back there. But I'm much more of the sense, make him more of a true ball carrier. Don't think anything of it. But if you are doing from the empty stuff and you're doing jet, you can still run power veer. Again, you already mentioned the quarterback runs if you don't use motion, but just trying to really stress defenses that way as opposed to getting tight and just trying to push them back with your might when you don't have a mighty offensive line, I think is a better step to try and maximize the skill sets they have, because that's going to be the big question the rest of the years is how can they work around that bad offensive line, because even an FCS defense held them below a rush yard before contact over the weekend, and I would imagine it's going to be more of the same against someone like Georgia.
No doubt. I like the 12 personnel because you can be 13, 14, you can be empty. And defenses, they're all about your personnel groupings.
Fantastic.
Right?
Yes. I'm glad you mentioned
when you're
that.
In tempo,
yeah,
you can change formations. If you have Juice Wells, who's ramped up, he's supposed to be ready to go, and Xavier Legette, and then you got Trey Knox and Joshua Simon out there with a running back. There's a lot of things you can do in tempo to prevent that defense from substituting and bringing in, nickel or dime if they're in a 4-3 defense.
Yes, and moreover, obviously when you have two tight ends on the field, you kind of signify, hey, we want to run the ball. But whether it is in the NFL or the college SEC, we have seen increased per opportunity metrics passing out of 12 personnel once the defense is thinking run. So it plays into that complementary aspect. When you're running fast and you're presenting, I wouldn't say a whole lot of looks, but more formations than what the defense is accustomed to seeing with a tight end out wide or both of them in line off ball, it really does open up a lot of things for the offense. And again, statistically, it should work out.
All right, so Gamecocks have Bulldogs coming up the next 2 weeks. They go between the hedges this week. What have you seen from Carson Beck? We really haven't had to see a whole lot. It really hadn't popped.
Yeah. It's fine. He's a offensive executive. And what do I mean by that? That's just a very diplomatic way for calling somebody a game
manager.
Yeah. But he's got a lot of weapons at his disposal. Like I mentioned earlier, they're basically running the same stuff, but not having a big blocking tight end like Darnell Washington has affected the operation. There's been less cushion despite returning a decent amount of quality offensive linemen. There's been less 12 personnel usage outright. Oscar Delp has not seen the snaps I anticipated at the early part in the season. Brock Bowers, he's been somewhat muted, but of course, he's still the best tight end in football. He's a matchup creator. He's an absolute freak. He's a tight end that can take a jet sweep to the house, a screen to the house, win up the sideline or down the seam. He is a true do-it-all guy. He can blocking, catching, and run. But just because of those transfers I mentioned earlier, maybe it could be Brian McClanahan. I don't know what the exact reason is, but there has just not been as many downfield plays at this point in the season. Of course, Georgia has been missing Ladd McConkey, who some view as their wide receiver one. He's definitely the most, productive returner within the hedges for that offense. But I did like Dom Lovick last year. Outside of Jalen Hyatt, he had the second most deep receiving yards in the conference. Ra Thomas, of course, caught Mike Leach's final play call of his life. So there's a lot of past experience working the field within those two receivers. It's just the first 2 weeks, they haven't been as consistent winning downfield. Now, I do think that Beck has been a little hesitant to let it rip downfield. He's been a little bit more to check down as opposed to try and get a highlight completion on tape. But again, that could also be because, like I mentioned earlier, rising too high, people are just trying to take away those deep, explosive completions. Now, you might be asking, now, why are they doing that and selling out, a 6 or 7 yard run by just not having as many people in the box? Well, over the last 5 years within the SEC, winning the explosive play battle is more correlated to victory than winning the turnover battle, winning the middle eight, rushing for more than your opponent, whatever you want to say. So it is immensely important. So you can see why there's a little bit more evidence to why there is practice that way. So even though Beck hasn't necessarily impressed me, he's definitely he's going to be put into positions to succeed, and he's dangerous enough because of the arsenal he has to where they can legitimately score on any given play.
All right, so you mentioned Ra Thomas, who at one point was a South Carolina commitment, caught Mike Leach's final play call. So obviously,
final pass, I should say. Final pass. It was wide cross, and he caught a vertical in the Egg Bowl for a touchdown. After that, Mississippi State just tried to ice the game out with runs. But yeah, and it's, of course, wide cross, typical air raid staple. It's worked its way in basically every single offense, no matter what you run in the country. So I found that to be a little bit of poetic justice for Mike Leach.
All right, so Zach Arnett takes over. He brings in offensive coordinator from Appalachian State.
Yeah.
Will Rogers, not the same prolific dude he has been. So talk about that set of Bulldogs, because they come into Williams-Brice Stadium at night, 7:30 p.m. on September 23rd. I'm making the trip. Can't wait for that, to see the light show.
It's a winnable game
for the first time.
It's a very winnable game for South Carolina. But the big switch, basically, if you want a bad example comparison, Mississippi State runs Missouri's offense. Now, I have dubbed this as the spread a hand offense. So Kyle Shanahan's offense in the NFL has become very popular. It's rooted in outside zone work with a lot of eye candy, a lot of complementary aspects to make you look like one thing, to set up another thing. It's very scripted. It's very detailed. The college stuff is a little bit more open. You'll see more orbit motions, more triple options, but the idea is the same. We want to run outside zone. We want to get your two deep guys out of their shells, either with pre-snap motion or just truly attacking the perimeter with that run action, get you out of your shell to make a play. So that has been their foundation the last 2 weeks. So that has been Will Rogers is not running mesh anymore. Will Rogers is not driving the offense. But one thing Will Rogers is still doing is being a check down Charlie. He had 0 passes over 10 yards downfield in the first half last week. And, of course, I tweeted out his pass charts yesterday. He had 1 completion over 10 yards downfield against Arizona. A lot of stuff behind the line of scrimmage, a lot of rinky-dinky stuff that he has made his name on, and unfortunately have tricked a lot of people into thinking that he's good. But now he is nothing more than a game manager, almost a tertiary aspect of that offense, with Joe Marks becoming the driver. Absolutely. So they have a lot of different outside zone looks. It's not just pure the off tackle. They also do split zone stuff where the tight end fires against the grain, either picking up the end man or sometimes trapping an interior. So they have a few different wrinkles from that aspect. So it's not just one play all the time and just hammering it. But same time, it is the driver of their offense. Over the weekend, I think against Arizona, 36% of plays and 40% of their yards were strictly off outside zone looks. So yeah, you stop that and you make Will Rogers try and emerge as a passer. We have not seen that quote unquote vertical pass offense we were promised during the spring with him so far. And I also like to mention, I love to bring it up when talking about Will Rogers. Despite playing in the pass happy air raid, he has 0 career completions on passes that travel beyond 40 yards past the line of scrimmage. He's a check down Charlie through and through.
No doubt. I mean, you look at his stats through 2 games, 33 of 46. Hell, he had more than that in 1 game with the Pirate calling the ball plays.
That's right. Yeah. So like it's an immense offensive shift. So you're seeing a little bit more Mike Wright. He was Vanderbilt's part-time starter last year, but he is he
had a big game against South Carolina. He is a dual threat guy that can run it and throw it.
No, he can't throw it, but he can run it. If he was a returning starter, he would have owned the worst interceptable pass rate in the conference. He would have owned one of the worst accuracy stuff in the conference. So he's not a passer. Don't kid yourself. He is a.
Well, I didn't say who would catch it. I just said he could throw it.
Oh, well, I'm not going to give him that much credit. But you do see, because how Will Rogers himself, not a mobile guy, how they have to kind of play right to try and open up some sideline to sideline type of avenues for the run game. So they have a little bit more power read stuff when he's in there, but still giving the quarterback a threat for a keep around the edge has become one of the secret sauces to try and get defenses out of sorts, of whether it is old school single wing philosophy or, having 2 threats on either side of the formations, depending on what the read goes, has helped. But I don't like the idea how they're shuffling quarterbacks because of how both of them are truly one-dimensional. Will Rogers is only going to pass, and Mike Wright is really only going to run. I will make him pass all day long. I don't care. I will take a 30-yard completion out of 10 tries. I don't care. He just doesn't do it for me. But I do think it is interesting how much he has seen snaps over the last couple of weeks, because I assumed he would only come in crunch time spots or red zone type of packages. But no, they're using him in the middle of drives and when the offense kind of needs a little bit of a pop, for lack of better words. But yeah, I don't like the fact how they have to rotate them both in, both out. They're not necessarily on the field at the same time. I would like it more if Mike Wright, kind of like how Jody is used for you all, where he is the backup quarterback, but he is getting true slot receiver reps. He is a receiver on the field. So it adds that little bit of an element. Well, they could do a double pass on this play. I would much prefer stuff like that than true, okay, just send Will Rogers out, the X receiver, and just have him stand there while we run the ball between the tackles. I don't like that approach. But again, if the defensive-minded Arnett, former defensive coordinator who's elevated to defensive coordinator, elevated to head coach, easy for me to say, wants to play small, utilize that running clock rule, get defenses or get opponents off the field and really, ice away ball games. That's definitely one way to do it. It's just not my favorite cup of tea.
I agree. All right. So, Clark, I can't thank you enough for being on. Man, you're awesome. In the chat, they said you need a Jolt Cola NIL deal. We love your enthusiasm.
Can you imagine me? I don't drink coffee or energy drinks or anything like that. So this is all natural, baby. Yeah. So, but can you imagine if I did a Jolt Cola or anything like that?
Hey, I'm here for it. I'm all in. We love it. Your board would be unrecognizable behind you. The whiteboard, you would just be Xing and Oing to death.
Yeah. So this was Ole Miss from this previous weekend. I was explaining to somebody how this skipper sail technique, which is also growing within the conference. So sail, nothing out of the ordinary. It's a 3-man stack. You have a vertical outbreaker and someone working towards the flat. You're trying to outload, whether it is cover 2, where you have a corner here and a potentially safety over here. 3 versus 2, you should win. But with how cross, like I mentioned earlier, is growing, let me tilt up. It's growing in popularity across basically every single offense. What skipper sail likes to do, it's setting up like you're going to run that cross, but then you bend back towards the outside. So you really can manipulate zone coverages and find yourself with a nice pocket outside the sideline. Maybe South Carolina can explore it because sail and dash sail has been one of the more prominent looks over the last 6 games within the scheme. So just a little bit of a wrinkle that maybe they could explore. But still, just talking about how Lane Kiffin really likes to complement, run at a fast pace, and make defenses pay when they think something's coming that isn't. So This isn't out of the ordinary for me. Of course, that's just one example, one team. But yeah, I do love the X's and O's, the schematics, and all that type of stuff, and showing how it can affect the bottom line and the outcome of games.
Great stuff. So tell everybody where they need to go to get all your stuff I mentioned at the top. Let everybody know, and then what you've got coming up for On 3 and at secstatcat.com.
So secstatcat.com, you just said it. It's Jimmy Joe's X and O's, any stat you want to know to a certain extent for SEC teams. So I chart every single offense, like I just mentioned, every single week within the SEC. So you can see stuff like yak, broken tackles, pass charts, what concepts people are running, how effective RPOs are. You can filter out results based on if you wanted to see first quarter stuff, or what certain distance. You can have a lot of resources. And of course, if you are a degenerate gambler, you have a lot of stuff at your disposal that can help determine which way of the line you're going to bet. So you can see stuff from a team level, an individual level, and a scheme level at secstatcat.com. During the season, because I'm charting so much, I'm not as prolific turning around content. So I do recommend keep up with me on Twitter, where I am the most active, and I do share this stuff after I am done charting. Before our conversation, I just finished charting Auburn. So once we get off here, I'm about to post their returns over the weekend. And I just mentioned they have one of the most rudimentary passing offenses in the SEC. And I can say that because I have receipts. I have evidence. I'm not just reading box scores, my friend. So also on3.com, whether it is our South Carolina channel or our other fan sites, do check it out. I'm also in charge of our transfer portal rankings, in addition to our weekly On3 impact rating. So I'm hoping we have a little bit more visibility with these rankings as the season progresses. But basically, every Sunday after the action is settled and the dust is coming down, I basically rip every single player's stats across the country, and I determine the 550 most impactful players. So that's the top 50 at each position. So do look out for that in the coming weeks, whether it is just a social feed or if we actually do turn it into an article. I am having a blast going through the figures and determining who are the most impactful players. So right now, Xavier Legette, he is absolutely South Carolina's most impactful player. He has a 97 rating that is basically tracking to be a second-round pick. So you keep that up, maybe he can crack into being one of the top 32 impact 5-stars if he has a nice weekend against Georgia.
Outstanding. Clark, I can't thank you enough. We love it. Love having you on. Man, meat and potatoes. That's what we like here on the pod. Have a fantastic rest of the week. I know there's no rest for the weary, but your enthusiasm, I know you're going to make it through. And we'll look forward to catching up with you again, maybe later in the season.
Absolutely, Keith. Anytime. You have a good one, my friend.
All right, you too. Take care. All right, that is SEC StatCat. That dude is off the chains. If he was a hamster running on the wheel, you wouldn't even be able to see the wheel. It's moving so fast. All right, we'll be back right after this with some Gamecock football stats and my rants of the week on Kirby Smart and Bubba Cunningham right after this.
If you enjoy listening and watching the free Wednesday show, now live streaming on YouTube, and would love more Gamecock Pod daily, join our growing Gamecock family by becoming a monthly or annual subscriber. You'll be able to listen to the show every day of the week and listen to guests like J.C. Sherbert, Hale McGranahan, and John Whittle from thebigspur.com, Colin Taylor and Mike Yuva from Gamecock Central, Emily Adams from the Greenville News, Ben Portnoy, Michael Lanana, and Jeremiah Holloway from GoGamecocks.com, Michael W. Bratton, the host of That SEC podcast, and many, many more. As a VIP subscriber, you can join or listen to the weekly live Zoom call with up to 100 of your favorite Gamecocks and friends. After the show is an unrecorded overtime segment where the real scoop gets dropped and discussed. It's like going down to your local pub or sports bar and having a conversation with your Gamecock friends about last week's football game, men's and women's basketball games, and Gamecock baseball. And of course, there's always recruiting to discuss. In addition to the weekly Zoom call, VIP subscribers get the most popular podcast The Morning After, which is released every Sunday morning during football season, and more VIP perks are in the works. Follow Keith on Twitter at KAllset, or follow the show on Twitter at GamecockPod. Go to the top of the homepage and follow the link. If all else fails, go to patreon.com/GamecockPodDaily. Join now and get up to 3 months free off an annual VIP subscription. You will love it, guaranteed. Now, back to Gamecock Pod Live.
All right, welcome back into Gamecock Pod Live. Appreciate everybody hanging out today and all the great comments in the Nana's Porch chat box. And so next week, if you are in Georgetown, JC Sherbert and I will be at a Carolina Rise event Tuesday in Georgetown at the Antlers Bar from 6:30 to 8:30. Come check us out. If you are in the Low Country, Wednesday, September the 20th, we will be on Shem Creek at Saltwater Cowboys from 6:30 to 8:30. Come out from 6:30 to 7 will be a meet and greet. I'll get up and do my thing. JC will do his thing. We'll have an open forum for Q&A after that. And look, the transfer portal, as Clark said, is important. You've got to have the money, okay? You want to look at NIL, South Carolina against North Carolina, that was your first NIL loss, Gamecocks, because you did not get the big run-stopping defensive tackle, Tank Booker. He went to Arkansas over Peanuts Moore. You did not get the offensive tackle, Isaiah Jada. He went to Colorado. You did not get Derek McClendon, the edge rusher. He went to Colorado. Okay, you did not get an impact linebacker in the portal. Yes, we love Stone Blanton. We love Debo. We know Pup is going to be really good. Mo Kaba, less than 5 plays, he's out for the season again. Okay, look at Florida State. Look at Colorado. NIL, transfer portal. They are winning. Come out and learn more about Carolina Rise. We're not going to get upset if you don't write a $5,000 or $10,000 check. You can join the 1801 Club for $18 a month. Every bit counts. So come out next Tuesday and Wednesday, and then I'm hanging out in town for the Mississippi State game. I'm going to be all over the place. I'll be tweeting out where I am. I may even go live on Twitter on game day. So very excited about that. So looking at the defensive stats, okay, Jalen Kilgore. I told you guys he was going to be a dude. Clayton White talked about it today. When Nick Emanwari comes back, Nick Emanwari, DQ Smith, and Jalen Kilgore are going to be starters, okay? Jalen Kilgore is tied with Debo Williams for the lead in tackles after 2 games with 18. And he's second on the team in unassisted tackles with 10. Okay, Stone Blanton has 12 tackles, DQ Smith 13 tackles, O'Donnell Fortune next with 11 tackles. Not a lot of defensive linemen making plays. Last year, Jordan Birch had no defensive end in the SEC had more tackles than Jordan Birch. Gamecocks have got to get more production up front on defense. I like the secondary. I love the young players. Kawan Banks plays like his hair's on fire. He's going to probably start at nickel this week. I like him. I like what I've seen from Marcellus Dowell. O'Donnell Fortune, he's a good player. He's got to continue to step up his play. They're going to be challenged this week. Boogie Huntley, TJ Sanders, what a game he had. He single-handedly wrecked one Furman drive. And Tonka Hemingway. And so this is my mullet Gundy moment here. Kirby Smart, what in the hell are you doing? Calling out Tonka Hemingway when he didn't say a doggone thing about how loud your stadium was, because I don't think he went in 2021. He was asked which were the loudest stadiums you have played in. He mentioned Texas A&M and one other one. And Kirby Smart at his press conference, a grown man, a millionaire, is calling out one of the nicest, most mild-mannered young men that's ever played at South Carolina, in Tonka Hemingway. Kirby Smart, shame on you. What are you doing twisting that and calling out a player? I mean, bro, that is below no class. That is Bush League. Kirby Smart, you hair club for men wearing Napoleon complex little dude. You are a winner. There's no doubt. What you're doing in Georgia is special. But, man, that is Bush League calling out a player because he didn't say Sanford Stadium's the loudest stadium I've ever played in. Well, you know what? It's just not. Okay? Even your own reporters say because of the way the stadium's built, the open air, it's not the loudest. And it's not. It's not as loud as Kyle Field. Okay? It's not as loud as Jordan Hare when they got it rolling. All right? Shame on you, Kirby Smart. Be a man. Okay? Talk about a man. Don't talk about a player. Okay? That is Bush League. That is below the decorum of an SEC head coach. And quite frankly, it was classless. But you know what? That's kind of what you see is what you get with Kirby Smart. And you know, not only is he the president, he's also a member. The dude wears a hairpiece. UNC, Bubba Cunningham. I mean, is there no end to North Carolina's superiority complex? Oh, well, we had a guy that entered the portal late. He waited too late. He's a double transfer. Oh, but he was coming home because he wanted to be close to his sick grandmother. Well, why did you take an official visit to Rutgers? The NCAA ruled him ineligible. He was a double transfer. He should have been ineligible. But North Carolina, how dare you treat us like everybody else? So we're going to talk about suing the NCAA. Oh, no, well, can't sue the NCAA, but we're North Carolina. Well, hey, Bubba Cunningham, how about the last time you went up against the NCAA on academic fraud, widespread academic fraud, and to protect your blue blood program, your men's basketball program? Okay, Roy Williams was disgraced. They were running a diploma mill. Players didn't have to go to class. They were given A's. North Carolina stonewalled the NCAA. There was no cooperation. They hired a team of lawyers, and because they proved that a few other students enlisted in those classes, it was mainly for men's basketball. We all know it. The NCAA is a cowardly organization. North Carolina's men's basketball players didn't have to go to class, and they were given A's. They graduated from the University of North Carolina, which is a bastion of academia. Well, it was a diploma mill, okay? You stonewalled the NCAA to protect Roy Williams. Roy Williams, I'm sorry, you have 13 players on scholarship. Don't tell me you don't know what classes your point guard are taking. Okay, you have somebody that's checking up on that. Unless you live in the cone of silence every moment outside of the game and when practice is going on, you know what's going on. Okay, and so maybe that was just a little bit of karma, Bubba Cunningham, for stonewalling the NCAA, for creating a culture of diploma mills and players given their grades so they didn't have to worry about anything but basketball. Okay? Maybe there's a measure of justice, but that doesn't come close. What North Carolina did, creating a diploma mill and giving grades to players to protect their blue blood program and their national championship coach, is a disgrace to college athletics. The only program that's been worse is Penn State protecting a pedophile to protect the reputation of Joe Paterno. And you know what? They got sanctioned, and then the NCAA had remorse and took it all back so Penn State and Bill O'Brien could try to win. Bubba Cunningham, you are a disgrace to college athletics, and Kirby Smart, you going after a player are a disgrace to the coaching profession in the Southeastern Conference. Head coaches don't go after other players, especially not somebody. Tonka Hemingway and his family have more class in the tip of their little finger than Kirby Smart has in his entire body. And those are my rants of the week. All right, tomorrow on Gamecock Pod Daily, Colin Taylor from Gamecock Central will be my guest. And then on Friday's MyBookie.ag Game Day show, Mike Gillespie, sports director at WOLO, makes his triumphant return to the podcast. We'll chop it up. He's had a lot of life changes. His dad has overcome cancer. He's married. A lot of things going on. I think he's got maybe a kid on the way or already born. We'll find out about that. And we'll talk Gamecocks and Bulldogs and pick games on Friday with him. And next week, Emily Adams is joining the show on Monday. We'll talk about South Carolina and Georgia. We'll talk about those sharp garnet Gamecock women's basketball uniforms. And then next Wednesday on Gamecock Pod Live, I mean, we got more great guests lined up from the Columbia media. I'll just tease that out. Also, last night on the Garnet and Black Town Hall, we had a major announcement from our ride or dies that hung out in overtime. Tune in on Monday to find out what that major announcement is. There's no better time to join right now and become a patron. You can sign up for a 7-day free trial membership. If you don't like it, you can cancel. But you'll be able to listen to the Morning After podcast on Sunday. You'll be able to join the Garnet and Black Town Hall on Tuesday night and hang around for overtime. It's a great time to join the podcast and join our Gamecock family. I hope you'll do it. Just go to patreon.com/GamecockPod Daily. If all else fails, follow me on Twitter at KAllsep or follow at GamecockPod. You can go to the top of the homepage and click on the link. Signing up is easy. You'll love it. I guarantee it. Craig, I know you talked about Kilgore and Swain all summer. And I agree. Kirby needs to shut that bowl cut up. Just don't, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. That's what my mama taught me. But when you are calling out players that really, it was not directed at you. It was a question he was asked at SEC Media Days. And heck, I don't even know if he was in Athens in 21. So, unfortunately, we did lose Trajan Jeffcoat too, and he was the SEC player or lineman of the week 2 weeks ago, and that was over the wokeness of one department. So, hey, thanks to everybody for joining in. I won't read Craig's final comment, but it's in the chat box because when we post to YouTube, we have to say if there's explicit language or not, and I'm trying to stay away from that today. You should have heard me last night on Overtime letting it rip about the hair club for men wearing Napoleonic complex, classless Kirby Smart, and Bubba Cunningham for that matter. UNC, oh, how dare you treat us like everybody else? Come on, man. Grow a pair, NCAA. You should have hammered them. Greg Sankey was on that committee. Even he let North Carolina off the hook. Come on, man. The only thing I've seen worse than that was what Penn State did. And so, like Forrest Gump, that's all I've got to say about that. And so tomorrow when we have Colin Taylor, and we'll give you the best of the Q&A from Dowell Loggains and Clayton White. I don't think there was any Pete Limbo today. This is Keith Alsep saying, God bless. God protect our troops. Thanks to all of you. Go Gamecocks. I'm out of here.